Thank you. Recording in progress. Okay, that's great. So yeah, thanks for everyone for taking their time. And I guess happy Biodiversity Week to everyone. So yeah, there's loads of great events going on. Ballymun and Bloom today was on. I walked down to that at lunchtime, so it was great to see so many people out in the sun. So yeah, it's a great time to kind of get involved, see what's going on, and learn a few things. So I guess I'll start sharing my screen and we can go into the presentation there now. Just get it on there. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that okay. Claire, that's working okay for you there? Super, okay. So thanks very much to Claire and GFI for having me. And again, really appreciate everyone's time coming out this evening and listening to the talk. So I guess a brief outline will be, so I'd like to do a little intro into my background and my roles and where I kind of came from, and then a little introduction into the Rediscovery Centre, what it is we do there, and then how that links in a way to biodiversity, how circular economy and biodiversity are kind of linked and combined. Then again, I know I recognize a couple of faces there on the chat there, so it's good to see some faces there that we know. So I'm not sure the entire level, so we'll give a general basis for biodiversity, kind of give a bit of an introduction and understanding of it, and then we'll look at some of the issues that biodiversity is facing. Then we'll look at some supports that we're doing in the centre ourselves, and then finally we'll look at actions that everybody can take, no matter your circumstance or situation, and how we can all help aid biodiversity, basically. And then, like we said, after that, maybe we'll have a bit of time if anyone has any questions, or we can discuss two things. And I'm sure there's a wealth of knowledge between all of us to be able to try and come up with answers for them, or, you know, look at different kind of solutions. So yeah, if that's okay for everyone, we'll get going here then. So yes, working now. So my background is in outdoor education. I worked in the industry for about 10 years. And after that, in around 2017, I started my own farm in Glasnevin, so just down the road from the Rediscovery Centre. And our main aim was to grow food naturally and support people locally. So we provided food for people locally, but also for cafes and restaurants in the city. And it was a great way for me to learn, kind of get my hands dirty and learn the hard way how things are grown. We don't use any chemicals or pesticides, and we try and use biodynamic farming and organic farming methods to try and support that growing. So yeah, we grow loads of different types of things. We've 3 polytunnels. We grow everything from grapes to tomatoes and cucumbers, and also have some fruit and veg outside. And we find it's a bit of a community project, so a lot of friends down there helping out and things like that. So it was going really well. And then a couple of teachers from local schools asked if it would be possible to bring students down. And so I was happy to share my knowledge or whatever I'd learned from the process with the students. And I found it really, really lovely. It was really warming to work with kids again, and to feel that enthusiasm and to be able to share that knowledge. So schools are great at the moment. They're doing so much for students and providing them with all these different things for them to go to. So it was really great to kind of interact again with that. And that's kind of what brought me back into education and then going to the Rediscovery Centre. And then you can see there's a nice swarm of bees there on the right there. So we have we've hens, ducks, bees, a couple of bunnies, and like I said, some polytunnels for growing some crops that wouldn't necessarily be able to grow in Ireland. So that's a little bit about my background there. I also am part of the Ballymun Biodiversity Action Group. John is with us as well this evening. He's also part of that group. So it's a really lovely group of people all coming together with similar kind of goals to try and support biodiversity in the area around Ballymun. And so through that group, they came up with the Ballymun Biodiversity Action Plan, trying to implement the biodiversity goals for the area. So part of that is engaging local community, also interacting with other groups and communities in the surrounding areas. So trying to create a kind of network to support biodiversity, basically, in Dublin. Okay, so the Rediscovery Centre, we are the National Centre for the Circular Economy. Basically, we're trying to move away from the linear economy that causes a lot of waste. And so we're trying to move towards a circular economy where we're looking at waste as a resource rather than something that needs to be just disposed of. So the whole idea about the centre is this circulation of resources and energy but also to support biodiversity. So we'll talk a little bit about those things now in a second. So the other things we have in the Rediscovery Centre, we have 4 social enterprises. So there's furniture, Rediscover fashion, Rediscover paint, and Rediscover cycling. So all of these enterprises have a similar goal of inspiring people, what we can do with what we consider to be waste, how we can turn them into something valuable and a resource that we can use. So inspire people as well in doing those things and upskilling, giving them the skills to fix those things themselves. And also provide a product or service to the public so they can come in and basically get those products that would have otherwise been thrown in the bin for a cheaper price. And so therefore it's quite sustainable, much better for the community and everyone. So that's kind of what we do there in the Rediscovery Centre. So how we can link in the Rediscovery Centre and circular economy with biodiversity is actually quite simple. So the way that we live in a linear economy, we're mining, we're harvesting, we're taking things from the earth. And then when we're finished with them, we're disposing of them. They're ending up in our oceans, in our air, and causing lots of problems. So a good remedy for this is to go the other direction and support biodiversity. So when we're supporting biodiversity, we're supporting clean air and nutrient-rich soil, plants and animals. So it's reversing those effects of the linear economy. So that's kind of the direct link to that. So biodiversity, so just a very quick introduction to biodiversity. Biodiversity, very simply, is the variety of all the living things we have on our planet. You can see from most of these pictures, these are all Irish things, the array of amazing creatures and plants and microorganisms and everything we have living in Ireland. All of these plants and animals and organisms, they're all supporting each other in an ecosystem. And it's very important that we don't miss links in those chains and therefore missing links in that ecosystem. So it's about supporting all these different environments, keeping clean environments for all these animals and insects to thrive in, basically supporting those areas. So moving on, issues with biodiversity, issues facing biodiversity. So we have urbanization. So in Ireland as well, we're especially bad at it, that we tend to build out rather than up. And so therefore our suburbs are getting bigger and bigger and joining in with our communities, and we're losing these green spaces, these green areas, these corridors for biodiversity to thrive or to live in. So we're going from beautiful big forests and free open land and space to very small cordon spaces of land with patches of green. So urbanization, the way we live, is having a huge impact on biodiversity. And climate change as well. So the stronger the effect we have on climate change, the stronger the effect we have on biodiversity, the bigger the impacts we have on all our organisms, our animals, our plants. And so that's a huge factor as well. Where we get our fruit from and how we produce it has a huge impact on biodiversity loss. So the way we farm with monofarming and turning rich, diverse place into one thing is usually not a great thing, and especially when we spray them with chemicals. So we're losing a lot of these nutrients and organisms we need to support the bigger things. And finally, from pollution as well. So whether it's water pollution or air pollution or land pollution, all of this is impacting negatively. Animals are eating our waste. It's creating really bad environments, and we're basically polluting our air and our waterways with the way we live. So all these are our negative impacts on biodiversity. So just really quickly, a couple of little highlights or what we do in the Rediscovery Centre when it comes to biodiversity. And so this is working. There we go. So we have a rainwater collection in the Rediscovery Centre. So we collect rainwater to flush our toilets, but also we collect rainwater for watering plants, as there's no chlorine or chemicals in it, much better for watering plants. And we also have a rainwater pond at the Rediscovery Centre. So the pond, in a very circular way as well, like circular economy and like biodiversity, it's an ecosystem of little things supporting and helping each other. So it's the nutrients and everything from the rainwater that's being fed into the pond. And then we have pebbles and sediment at the bottom. And then we have lots of plants in there as well. There's oxygenating plants. So we have stickleback fish living in there. We've also got pond snails that move around and clean the pond. And then we also have lilies and other plants in the pond that pollinators can come and collect nectar from. So there's a whole circularity happening there in the pond itself. We also have green walls and green spaces. So here you can see we have the living green wall, and we have a green roof as well. And the reason for these, there's many purposes for these, but they provide food and habitat spaces for insects and animals. They also provide clean air, water soakage, absorption from the rain, and actually even help with thermal insulation and things like that as well. So there's multiple uses for these, and these are kind of good examples of what other places can do as well, aiding biodiversity. If you think of all the rooftops and walls, we have the potential space for that in Ireland and abroad as well. So other things we have at the Rediscovery Centre is we make sure we've pollinator friendly planting. So the plants that we have are good for our pollinators. They're native, and we're putting in the right areas. We're having flowers at different times during the year. And also it's very important that we're still keeping wild areas, and a lot of what people will consider to be weeds or things like that. Very important areas for biodiversity and for our insects and for the diversity of those animals, to feed them at different times during the year. So they provide a massive support for that. Another thing that we have at the centre as well, we're a business supporter for the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So you can find more information for this at pollinators.ie, but any businesses can apply for this, and you need to do a certain amount of reporting and planting and work each year. So we're very proud to be part of that. And so we're one of the business supporters for the Pollinator Plan as well. And then housing, boxes and hotels. Another very important part for biodiversity is providing habitats. So as you can see, we've got lots of bug hotels, we've got bat boxes, we've got a little blue tit there sticking its head out of the bird box there. So I caught that one just the other day. Very hard to catch a blue tit flying in and out, by the way, but managed to just nab that one on its way out. So you can see it's being used really well. And then on the left there, you can see that we have some swift boxes as well under the building there beside the green wall. So trying as much as possible to aid and support biodiversity in all the different spaces and places that we can. With that in mind, we will move on to different actions that we can take. So not everyone can take those actions, as they don't have a big centre to do all those things in. Everyone lives in different situations in different places and areas, and has different understanding and knowledge. But everyone can do something to aid biodiversity, at least anyway. So we'll look at some of the options that we have, or the different supports we could do. So I think the most important and the first thing that we can all do, being at this talk, is a great first step if this is your first step. So getting the knowledge and understanding of the issues is number one. But also protecting and supporting what we already have, what's already in existence. So in Ireland, for example, we have incredible country with wildlife and animals. We've got incredible forests and coastal regions, boglands, peatlands, wetlands, and rivers and lakes. And all these areas that we have, they are diminishing, they are getting smaller. And we do need to protect them. We do need to support them. So we need to be aware of what they harbor, what lives there, what is supported by those areas, and how we can kind of get involved and try and help them. And then also supporting some of our vulnerable creatures and insects and animals, some of them on the red list as well. And getting yourself aware of what animals need support, and what currently is in place to support them, and what we can do personally as well to kind of support them. So I guess education, educating yourself on how we can support those things is really step one, I think. So going on now again, so what leaving wild areas, this is another area that I thought is key. So maybe not necessarily something that we are doing personally, but it's great to see that communities, government, councils are all putting pressure on this now. So we've all seen it last year, where we had our No Mow May campaign. We had it again this year, and it seemed to be going quite well. So it's about making sure our councils are leaving those spaces, understanding why it's important to leave those spaces. So obviously they're food for pollinators, but they're also habitats for those insects and animals. They're also really good for rainwater and for drainage, and they're supporting everything. And again, we think about air quality and air temperature. So it's doing so many different things at the same time, and especially on roadsides where there's cars passing all the time. So it's something that's really important to have around. So it's also a great visual. I think a key part of this, we can talk about it in discussion after, but it is a bit of a culture about having a prim and perfect lawn. And it's great to see that we're slowly moving away from that. And even having a prim and perfect border if you want, and then having a bit of wildflowers in the middle, I think is a great compromise of the two things. So, you know, in whatever space we have, whether it's the garden in front of the house or in the back, or the tiny patch of grass you might have outside the house, it's just important to think about, you know, certain times a year we need to let those flowers flower, and then let them go to seed, and then cut at different times of the year as well. So something great that we can all try and support, I think, with that, leaving those wild areas. And then from my experience, I think a healthy plants and healthy garden definitely comes from healthy compost. So there's also a bit of stigma about composting in Ireland, I found, and people, maybe they aren't really entirely sure about what to compost or how to compost. But compost is the key to nutrient-rich soil, to having good plants, and having your own garden compost, if it's something that you can do, whether it's in a small little pot or a bucket or in a bigger space, is something I would implore everyone to do. So it was the first thing I did when I moved into the farm, was that we started to compost and create a lot of compost. So basically, compost is very simple. You just need to create a good balance of green and brown, wet and dry. Anyway, we can discuss it later if people have any questions about that. But yeah, you start off with a good base. So getting composting, even the idea of taking something that people just consider waste, you know, they throw it away, they throw it into the black bin, but actually it could be something that could be generated, can make into something with value, with nutrients. So even putting it in the brown bin, you're turning it into compost. There's potential for that to be used. So that's a great thing if you don't have a garden. But if you do have a garden and you have the space, it would be amazing to be able to start with a little bit of compost. And then when it comes to planting, so the All Ireland Pollinator Plan is a great guide again for what to plant. Best thing, actually, I was listening to another talk a while ago, is just to let the grass go and see what comes. And you'll be surprised to see what amazing things are underneath there, and that'll start popping up. But the Pollinator Plan is a great guide for you to go into and have a look and see what kind of flowers and plants you can put in support. So it's not all just about ornamental flowers as well. There's lots of other different types of things. So there's herbs as well. So you can see there's lavender down the bottom as well. Thyme, loads of rosemary, loads of other types of herbs that are pollinator friendly. And then when we think about shrubs and trees as well, making sure that they're native and non-invasive. So the Pollinator Plan has all of that in it. And just making sure that we're supporting flowers throughout the year at different times, and having early flowering flowers, and then also having flowers at later stages during the seasons. Then it's also interesting to look at the different types of flowers and how you can have a single-headed flower, and when that flower dies, then that's the end of the pollen sometimes for the plant, and the nectar for the plant. But if it could be a multi-headed flower, then that's the opportunity for those little florets or on the top of the flower to die off, and then the next flower will come along. So it's a continuation for the pollinator, basically. So yeah, just looking at the different types of native trees, flowering and fruiting for our biodiversity. And then you can see as well, even if you don't have a garden, a tiny little window box can have an array of amazing plants and flowers, and a support for biodiversity there again. So that's composting and planting. Then when we look at food, water and shelter, so that's something all of us need. So it's something all of our animals and insects need as well. So providing food. So if we do provide food to birds, it's important to know what kind of birds you're providing the food for. So depending on the size, and then what kind of food they eat, moving these things around the garden at different stages, all kind of important things as well. And then thinking about, well, do we really need to go and buy a bird feeder? Thinking about reusing materials that already exist as well. So there's the example of the milk carton. So sometimes you can just use something like a milk carton to make a bird feeder. So it's important to remember, if you do feed the birds, it's good to try and continue to support them throughout the season, if you do that once you start supporting them. When it comes to water collection, so something that we have in Ireland a lot of rain, so a great resource. And again, that rainwater is doesn't have any chemicals in it or anything like that, so it's great to be able to collect it. Very simply, you can put a little pot in the garden with water in it, and the insects and animals will be delighted for it. So sometimes think, oh, bird bath's very important, but insects also need water, so it's important if I put water for bees and butterflies and all these different pollinators too. So having a rainwater collection, something like the water butt there, or even just a small bucket would be great. Something to collect rainwater in your garden and give it back then to the animals, or use it yourself for watering your plants as well. So it can be a great resource there. And then providing shelter for the animals too. So you can have your bird houses, which are great, and you can see the blue tits. They'll go in and out, and they'll be delighted with the little spaces. If you want to go a few steps further and have a swift box, would be great as well to try and support swifts. The problem with our buildings and our houses these days, not that it's a problem, is we're making them too well. And in the spaces in the old houses where there were spaces and gaps, we'd have spaces for insects and birds and all these different things. But now we're building so well that we're losing all these little gaps and spaces. So actually they're losing a lot of their habitat. So it's great to be able to give them back in the garden in some way. So you can make an insect hotel with different materials. And very simply, you could have a couple of logs with a couple of holes drilled into them on the side in your garden somewhere. And believe it or not, you'd be supporting a huge range of insect biodiversity there as well. Okay, organic and chemical free. So this is something we're really strong about on the farm. It's very important to try and grow organic. I feel that when you grow organic, whether it's food or when it's ornamental, you're providing real support for those plants. I feel a lot of plants that are grown under chemicals are a lot weaker and not able to support themselves if there is any harsh weather and things like that. So if you're growing organic, obviously your compost is really important. So you have nutrient-rich compost, you're supporting all those things. And then a lot of the old thinking is that, oh, if I grow organic, I'm going to have all these problems and it's not going to grow. The best way to do it is to test it and try it out yourself. And if you do have any problems, there's plenty of help out there, and there's plenty of very simple things that work as well. Like there's those garlic sprays for pests and things like that. Sure, if you look at it, do you want to be spraying chemicals on the food that we're eating? If it's not safe for that person to be spraying the chemicals in the first place, it is safe for us to be eating those things. So it's the same with our soil and all the microorganisms inside it, that once we start spraying those things, we're killing off all that life, all that bacteria. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring all that life back by supporting it in a natural way. So there's lots of different things we can do, like on the farm ourselves. There's a lot of permaculture gardening and horticulture we can do, where if you have something that's quite susceptible to something coming along to eat it, insects or slugs or things like that, there's lots of different tricks I'm sure people have heard about, but growing garlic and growing chives and things like that in an area around that as well will deter those creatures. So there's lots of different things we can do, and something, if anyone has any questions during the chat after as well, I'd be happy to discuss a little bit. So yeah, we want to try and basically support that chemical-free organic way. This is another very important one that we were discussing a little while ago in our group, is about wildlife corridors, and something we don't really think about. If you look in the bottom left picture, we think about the way that we live in our communities, and we all have gardens. We do them in different ways. Some people support very well, some people garden in a different way, and that's totally fine. But we're separating a lot of these green spaces before for our small little animals, and it's very important to create corridors for these animals to pass through, to find food, to find shelter. It could be a very simple thing, just calling into your neighbor next door and saying, listen, should we put a little space in the fence so that our hedgehogs or squirrels or badgers or foxes or whatever can pass through. So it's about supporting those animals and creating corridors for them. So having hedgerows as well and supporting them and understanding the life that revolves around through them, and different things that the councils and communities are doing to try and support them are great. So we need to start doing it within our communities, in our gardens as well. So making sure we have those spaces for those animals to pass through and to kind of to go kind of unseen as well. Another one that we have is citizen science and reporting. So this is a great way to get, as well as planting as well, by the way, but to get younger people involved as well, is to feel like they're impacting in some way, that you know, they're reporting, they're citing, they're seeing of this perhaps you know, insect or bird, or that needs a bit of protection or needs a bit of help, that they saw it and they're able to put that in, or how many they've seen. So the National Biodiversity Data Centre is a great space. You can do a fit count, where you do a flower insect time count, basically seeing how many pollinators or insects come to that plant in a certain amount of time, and then you input that data into the National Biodiversity Data Centre, sorry. And so that can be a great way to kind of you know, you're part of something bigger, and that's a great way for students as well to feel really part of things. So for birds as well, Birdwatch Ireland have the Irish Garden bird survey. So that's another great one that you can do, where you can record different bird sightings at different times that you've seen. That could be in collaboration with your bird feeders or bird houses that you put up as well. And you kind of watch the birds in your garden come and go and see the array of different birds that you have, all the different species that we have, the beautiful birds in Ireland that we have and we support, and we want to make sure that they continue to be supported and looked after. And then finally, there's Bat Conservation Ireland that also have a reporting program as well, where you can report and go and look at bats, try and find bats at nighttime, places that they're staying and living, and how we can support them. And by reporting them, we're understanding that these are the areas that they're in that need to be protected, and it's a great way for us to feel like we're actually making an impact and protecting these species that need protection. And then we have community action. So after all that information, it's great to be able to act and to do something about it. So engaging local community, talking to people, having this conversation, talking to your neighbors, feeling like you want to do something, whether that's creating wildlife corridors together, planting in communal areas, doing community cleanups together, where you're taking away rubbish and cleaning the areas, or beach cleans, whatever it is in your community, but basically getting empowerment from your community, getting people together with similar aims and goals, sharing the knowledge that you have and the experience, and then kind of that idea snowballing together, getting bigger and bigger, and spreading to wider people and wider communities. A great way to engage younger people as well, the next generation, to kind of get involved with climate action and do something impactful and powerful. Seed swaps, plant swaps, they're also great things to be able to share. You know, you grow one sunflower and you can have 1,000 seeds from that one sunflower. So why not share those seeds and spread them out throughout your community to friends? And so it's a great way to be able to support that as well, and feeling like you're part of something bigger and a wider community. So that is kind of the end of the presentation there.